We're tackling a topic that is absolutely crucial, yet honestly, it's pretty often misunderstood: workplace harassment policies. We'll be drawing directly from some really thorough research by Bahauddin Mushtaba and Jasmine Kuzak. Okay, let's just dive right in, because we're going to take some dense HR and legal frameworks and translate them into practical, everyday tools that you can actually use.
To really wrap our heads around the gravity of this, I want you to put yourself in the hot seat for a second. Imagine you're a manager, right? You just got a note from one of your employees. Let's call her Karen. Now, Karen is claiming that her colleague Shauna is getting completely biased, negative performance reviews from a supervisor. And that supervisor, they report directly to you. Karen says this supervisor is notoriously harsh on female employees, except for a select few who quote-unquote play the game. But here's the kicker. You actually reviewed and approved Shauna's bad evaluation yourself, totally believing it was just based on her actual job performance. So, what do? It's a really complex dilemma, and honestly, how you handle it in this exact moment can either save your workplace culture or completely shatter it.
So, to help us figure out this exact dilemma with Karen and Shayna, here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at the real costs of harassment, define unwelcome behavior, navigate romance and favoritism, break down a strong policy, outline 9 steps to resolution, and finish up with cultivating a zero-tolerance culture.
All right, let's get into Section 1, the real cost of harassment, and what the researchers call the revolving door syndrome.
Behind closed doors, there is this massive, hidden human cost. The research points out a pretty staggering estimate. Anywhere from 20 to 40% of employees just suffer in silence. They don't report harassment incidents. Why? Simply because they are terrified that management or HR is going to mishandle it. And when your team doesn't trust the system, you get this revolving door syndrome. It's like new hires accept a job, walk in, witness hostile behavior, and basically walk right back out those same doors a few months later. It completely tanks morale, kills productivity, and trust me, it brings some incredibly expensive turnover and lawsuits to the company.
So, to stop that revolving door, we need crystal clear boundaries. Let's move to Section 2, defining unwelcome workplace behavior, and the whole battle of intent versus impact.
We hear the word harassment tossed around all the time, right? But legally speaking, in a professional setting, what does it actually mean? Well, the source defines it as any offensive, unwelcome, or uninvited behavior that happens repeatedly, just to insult, intimidate, or torment someone. Ultimately, it causes profound discomfort and just breeds a completely hostile workplace.
And this brings us to a legal reality that, honestly, catches so many managers off guard. When you're investigating an allegation, harassment is measured strictly by the perception of the victim. It doesn't matter what the original intent of the harasser was, so if someone says, "Oh, come on, I was just joking around, I didn't mean to offend anybody," yep, under the law, that excuse doesn't fly. It doesn't invalidate the victim's reality. If the behavior was unwelcome and created a hostile environment, it's harassment. Period.
So what does this actually look like on a random Tuesday at the office? We're talking about slapping labels or nicknames on people, throwing around slurs, making derogatory jokes, or even sending hostile emails or memes. When that stuff happens repeatedly to intimidate someone, it is no longer just interpersonal friction, it's formal harassment. And if those actions target protected categories like race, religion, age, or gender under the Civil Rights Act, boom, it officially becomes illegal harassment.
And speaking of protected categories, it's really interesting to see how these legal protections have evolved. Take this groundbreaking 2012 EEOC decision involving a veteran named Mia Macy. She applied for a job as a ballistics technician and was exceptionally qualified, but she was denied the job after coming out as transgender. Well, the EEOC officially ruled that discrimination against transgender employees is directly covered by the federal sex discrimination law, Title VII. That's an absolutely crucial precedent for leaders to know if they want to ensure their workplace is genuinely inclusive.
Okay, let's shift gears to Section 3, navigating romance and favoritism. Definitely the gray areas of policy.
When we talk about illegal sexual harassment under Title VII, it generally falls into 2 distinct buckets. Bucket number 1 is quid pro quo, which literally means this for that. That's when a workplace decision, like, say, getting a promotion or not getting fired, depends entirely on an employee submitting to unwelcome sexual conduct. Bucket number 2 is a hostile work environment, which is when repeated sexual conduct unreasonably interferes with someone doing their job, creating an abusive space. But what if the relationship is totally consensual? Well, you've got to think about the ripple effect. Let's say a subordinate gets a completely unearned salary bump because they're secretly dating their boss. That agitates the entire office. The research notes that even if sexual favoritism doesn't directly violate Title VII, it indirectly creates a hostile environment. It basically plants this really toxic perception that the only way to get a promotion around here is to sleep with management.
And the legal landscape here has totally shifted recently in favor of transparency. For decades, companies used these forced arbitration clauses. Basically, it meant employees had to settle harassment cases secretly, behind closed doors, which, surprise, surprise, usually favored the company. But on February 10, 2022, the U.S. Senate passed legislation ending forced arbitration for these exact cases. Now, victims can bypass that private arbitration and take their cases straight to public courts. It's a real game changer, and it makes having a preventative policy more critical than ever.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, Anatomy of a Strong Policy, looking at the iLead Academy model. The researchers outline a sample framework called the iLead Academy model to show us exactly what good compliance looks like. It's built on 3 main pillars. First, a clear definition, so there's zero confusion. Second, a strict protocol for reporting, and this is key. They emphasize that any suspected case needs to be reported to management or HR within a 24 to 48-hour window. Fast reporting is absolutely essential. And third, a transparent step-by-step procedure for handling those incidents once they're actually reported.
Let's put this into practice with Section 5, 9 steps to resolution and taking action as a manager.
All right, it's time to jump back into that hot seat with Karen and Shanna. How do you actually apply this stuff? Well, phase 1 is receiving and documenting. When Karen comes into your office, your very first priority is to document her complaint completely and objectively. You've got to treat it respectfully, create a safe space, and assure her there is absolutely no retaliation going to happen. Inform her of the procedures, and then keep the whole thing strictly private.
Once it's all documented, you enter phase 2, investigating and resolving. This is where you verify the facts. Go check with other people who can actually confirm what happened with Shanna's reviews. Then you make a judgment that aligns entirely with company policy, and yes, that means putting aside your own initial bias, since you are the one who approved the review. Communicate the results clearly, implement the consequences methodically, and this is a big one, always follow up later to make sure professional behavior is actually continuing.
Finally, Section 6, cultivating a zero-tolerance culture, going beyond the written policy.
Look, having a piece of paper in a binder is really just step 1. A policy is only as good as the people enforcing it. Unintentional slip-ups happen constantly, mostly because managers just lack the proper training. Companies literally have to invest in management development workshops. Leaders need to be taught how to communicate, how to run fair performance reviews, and how to genuinely become ethical coaches. When leaders actually model professional behavior, that's when a zero-tolerance culture thrives.
Which leaves me with this final thought for you to reflect on today. Does your organization just have a policy, checking a compliance box? Or do you actively foster a culture where everyone goes way beyond the bare minimum of the law to act as an ethical leader? Because creating an inclusive workplace, it's not a one-and-done thing. It's an ongoing commitment.